Hey guys, tonight we ease down into a quieter place with me, and we walk your mind backward to a morning about 12,000 years ago. It's playful, it's slow, and yes, you probably wouldn't survive this day without coffee, socks, and heating, but we're here to practice pretending. We'll keep it cozy, keep it simple, and keep your eyelids heavy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are now. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're on your side, knees drawn up, one hand tucked beneath your cheek, because pillows haven't been invented yet. Less. You count your own arm, which is surprisingly ergonomic when you're tired enough. A redanned branch shelter curves over you like a low sky. Saplings bend into a dome, and the walls are braided with last summer's cattails. Still faintly sweet, still a little damp, where the river throws its breath across the bank. Smoke sleeps in your hair, and your hair sleeps in your eyes. Not a salon look, but the fragrance says you survived yesterday's evening fire, and maybe a few jokes told in a circle of knees and shadows. Outside, the light is a rumor pale gray, pressed against the edges of Matswile. Inside, your world is the warm scrape of a hide on your shoulders and the tiny glow tucked under ashes near your knees. You aren't a morning person. The morning is a you person. The river does its slow breathing in and out, and a frog clears its throat like a theater usher wrangling the sunrise. You press your palm to the ash and feel heat, the kind that says the fire is sleeping but not gone, like a friend who nodded off in the middle of your story and kept holding your hand. Out there, beyond the woven wall, the world is in a small mood. A reed knocks a neighbor. An owl offers one last late opinion, and the mist hovers over the water, the way steam hovers over tea you haven't discovered yet. You measure the hour. By chill, nose cold, toes warm enough, face prickled where the air slips through the reeds. A very scientific method, and also free. Somewhere upstream, a fish moves, and the sound is like someone smoothing linen, which you also haven't invented. But the brain is generous with similes. Right now, this land is easing out of a long, cold glaciers have been backing up for centuries, leaving stones and glittering lakes behind them, and even at this edge of the river, the air remembers winter in its bones. People like you sleep in shelters like this, across many valleys, using branches and reeds because they're fast, repairable, and, frankly, the original minimalist aesthetic. Historians still wonder if nights back then were regularly split sleep. Wake, talk softly, sleep again, or if that pattern was just a later habit. Either way, you're stirring in that gentle seam between dark and light. Your shelter door is nothing more than a reed mat pushed aside, and a thin slate of dawn sneaks in, luminous as a fish's belly. You listen because listening is your news feed. Wind, water, birds, the crackle where a tiny coal shifts under its blanket. Some nights, coals were carried from one camp to another, packed in fungus or punky wood, so they'd smolder for hours. You've seen people pinch off a glowing bead, like they're saving a star for later. You breathe in the ashan sap smell and taste a little bit of yesterday. It's not gourmet, but it's familiar, like the camp version of leftovers. Your blanket is stitched hide soft, where smoke and hands have worked it. Heavy enough to feel like a promise end, a second layer of woven reeds lies under you to lift. Your bones off chill ground. Some groups line sleeping places with sweet-smelling grasses that keep insects away. You've learned to crush a sprig and pull that vanilla hint to your nose before settling down. Now the first birds try the morning like testers sampling soup. A wren pours out a paragraph of enthusiasm. A crane grumbles, as if reminded of its back, and over everything runs the soft, beaded hiss of the river. You nudge the nearest ember with a twig, watch a tiny orange eye open, and you feel the quiet luck of having those embers at all. No fire, no breakfast, no fire, no warmth, no fire, and you are just a mammal wearing yesterday's smoke. You wait, instead of hurrying, because hurrying is for later, and the dawn is going to arrive, whether you glower at it or not. If there's a joke left from yesterday, it's this: the first open concept, floor plan, floor concept, and a lot of weather. Somewhere beyond the reeds, a soft footfall pauses, then resumes. It could be a deer testing the margin, or a fox, or the hush-footed kind of friend who wanders in a circle before lying down. The partnership between our species still braiding itself, camp by camp. You rub your wrist where a thong left a comfortable dent, feeling the grit of yesterday's work still faintly in the lines of your palm. Cleanliness exists. It just isn't pressurized. The river is the sink, the tub, the dishwater, and the view in the faint light, an insect that looks like a small leaf flickers against the mat. You blow it gently back outside through a crack. No one calls, no one texts. The sky just turns a little paler, which is the prehistoric version of a push notification. On the other side of the fire pit, a small pile of flint chips glints like scales. Someone was napping last night, and a few curls of stone sliced into the dirt with neat, surprised edges. You know, the trick of carrying a shard in your belt pouch, wrapped so it doesn't bite, just like gossip, travel fast. The reeds shift again, and a cooler draft lifts the hair on your forearm. It smells of water, peat, a faint metallic Thames. From stones rubbed smooth by glacial hands, you pull the hide closer, and the seam that runs across it grazes your chin. Someone stitched that with a bone needle, the holes so regular you recognize the rhythm in your own hands. You hear a distant crack as a sheet of ice loosens on a shaded bend. Winter isn't gone, it's just moved into the corners like a shy cat. Your nose runs a little, you sniff. The fire breathes back. Everything negotiates with everything else, quietly. It's early Holocene math. 1 ember plus patience equals a day. You tighten the laces on your ankle wrap, the thong warm from your own skin, and consider the route your feet will take when the light grows. Along the river sand, around the clay, bank that swallows ankles, past the willow that looks like it's always telling a secret. You don't hurry through this thought. It's the only itinerary you need. And anyway, everything here works better slow. From the direction of the meadow, a low chorus starts geese, negotiating the terms of their day, and the sound folds into the damp air like another layer of bedding. Maybe later, you'll swap a story about the one who hissed at you last spring like a badly tuned flute. For now, you just smile into the blanket. On a little shelf made of a forked stick and a flattish stone, you keep a few things you like to see first. A shell with a hole in it, a tiny cluster of seeds strung on a thread, an edge of red ochre in a leaf wrap that stains your fingertips with sunlight. Later, you'll mark a cheekbone with it, not because anyone asked, but because it pleases you to carry a little mourning on your skin. Sometimes people chew resin or birch tar as they work there are old pieces with tooth marks, pressed right in end. You've tried it once, found the flavor smoky and strange, like kissing a campfire that tells you to sit up straight. Your breath fogs when you speak, so you don't. The morning asks for fewer syllables, more noticing. Through the mat, the sky turns to a softer blue, a color you could drink. You slide the mat aside, a hand's width, and let in the thin light, and your eyes adjust with the quick grace of practice. Grass beads with dew lean toward the water. A heron lifts one leg like a careful thought. Far off, the dark stripe of a pine bank marks the horizon. Somewhere, someone coughs, the single note of another shelter waking. Your circle isn't large, but the sound of it loosening its joints spreads across the camp like bread rising. You touch the hide again, pat the place where heat pools like a curled cat, and let a slow breath lengthen, because this day will ask you to get up soon, and you might as well arrive rested. At the edge of the ash bed, you see a coal wink as if it heard you. It would be rude not to wink back. From here, the day is a line you can trace with your finger in the air. Water, coals, grain, hands, laughter, quiet, more hands, more quiet. The cold on your cheeks reminds you that this is not a dream with underfloor heating. Carrying the smell of wet earth and wood smoke like a badge. You are awake, not all at once, but the way a pool clears surface first, then depth till you can see the bottom stones. Your job is simple for this moment. Be a person in a small house at the edge of a river as the last ice age loosens its grip. You don't have to understand climate or stars yet. You just have to notice that your breath is a little cloud and your hands are steady. When you finally shift, the reed mat whispers. When you sit, your joints pop softly, a basket of kernels settling. You reach to the ash bed and pinch a thin shell of gray aside to see what the coals want to be this morning. They answer with a little sound like sugar hitting a hot pan, a tiny kiss of energy that promises more. Your stomach turns over once, politely. Yes, yes, we'll get to that. For now, you let air find the ember, and you lengthen your spine, eh? Slow unfurling, because the day is going to ask for your back, your legs, your careful eyes, and your sense of humor, which, fortunately, you packed. Some mornings, are drum beats. This one is the quiet before the drum, the soft pad of reed on reed, the cold sipping at your cheeks, the warmth nudging your knees, the river reminding you slowly to breathe with it. You tilt your head to listen to the tiny cracklings, letting your breath slow until a single thread of air could be enough to wake the light. You lean in until the ash is a pale gray moon under your chin and use the bellows you were born with your lungs to whisper air into the glow. A thin shell of last night's ash breaks and caves like sugar, and a coal wakes brighter, its color deepening from ember orange to that sharp peach that means it wants to live. You nudge it with a willow twig, gentle as turning a sleeping child. One ember becomes two, and in the powdery dark, you count them the way you'd count stars. Here's the small one that flickers when you breathe. Here's the stubborn one at the rim. Here's the one that could be your new sun if you treat it right. You prepare the little nest you've been saving. A handful of dry grass, a twist of cedar bark shredded with your thumbs until it's fuzzy. As a baby bird and a pinch of cattail fluff, you tucked inside a cracked shell to keep it dry. A smear of resin sticky and citrus sharp threads through your bundle. Your fingers come away shiny and sweet smelling. The original hand lotion with bonus flammability. You cup the nest and press the glowing coal into its hollow, ash gentled aside. Then fold the sides up and over like you're telling a secret you want to reach tomorrow. Sometimes the ember is shy. You turn to a flat stone shelf and, as assurance, lay out your fallbacks. A thin blade of flint, a cube of iron pyrite with glitter caught in its corners, and a straight, dry spindle with a slate of hearthwood rubbed smooth with use. A faint sulfur temps rises when the flint touches pyrite, sparks know ready to fall if it must. By this time, people know both the spar can catch trick and the drill and smoke method. Old skills traveling in the hands long before this morning. Your lighter subscription hasn't shipped yet, but you're not worried. You keep a strip of treated fungus too. Light as a moth wing the felted stuff some call tinder, pounded soft from a shelf that grew on a dead log and taught to love sparks. More than life. If a spark lands, it glows without flame. A coal you can carry in a hide pouch for hours, like a sleeping red eye. There's punk wood as well, crumbly and eager to smolder. A little cigar of yesterday's tree. People sometimes travel with coals, wrapped in moss and fiber, so the fire walks with them. You've watched someone open such a bundle and blow a star awake, as if pockets were invented for embers first, and only later for stones, snacks, and opinions. You lift the tinder nest too, your mouth and breathe. The trick is to blow like you're not blowing, to feed it with a thread of air, not a gust, letting the heat thicken until it wants to be flame on its own. A dark curl of smoke rises and nestles under the reed roof, and 3 beats later, something inside the bundle brightens, edges shifting from glow to lick, from coal to petal. Heat becomes your alarm clock in this world with 0 snooze buttons. If you roll over now, ash will decorate your cheekbone and you'll wake looking like you fell asleep at a charcoal gallery when flame arrives. Small and important. You lower it into the hearth's waiting, arm-thin twigs, ribby and eager, arranged like a tiny forest that leans in to whisper back. You saved a few slivers, shaved from a resin-rich pine, not fat wood, that smells like a memory of summer and burns long for its size, and you feed in too. The resin pops, a polite applause, and the smoke furthers its case, trading sharpness for warmth as it climbs. Your palm hovers near, cautious, thankful. A moth that chooses not to be dramatic. The stones around your hearth tell their own story, pinking with old heat, edges cracked and scaled from too many mornings like this one. You learn to keep a ring, so embers stay put, and so a little pit gathers coals for later. Over seasons, stones redden and flake, and a soft bed of charcoal accumulates so predictably you could call it your home address. You've spread a layer of clean sand in the bottom to keep damp from sulking up and spoiling the effort. When it rains, the hearth reminds you to build a small roof, which is less glamorous than heroics, but far more effective than complaining. Smoke remembers to be indecisive and tries to learn which way to go. So you slide the reed mat aside, a hand's breadth more, and let the river draft sort it out. A pale stream curls and finds the gap. The rest pools under the roof and paints the woven ceiling a deeper brown. Tiny soot constellations appear, dots where drops of resin steamed and burst. You give them names only you will use: the salmons, the bent stick, the sleepy dog, because naming things is a quiet way of staying awake. The scent sifts into your hair again, a perfume you'll carry all day, better than any cologne called freshly survived. With the flame steady, you widen its diet. First, finger with sticks that go dark, then flame, then dark again, arguing softly with physics. After that, the 4 arm-length branches you peeled yesterday and leaned under a ledge to keep dry. The fire answers in a friendly voice, a low cough when it finds a knot, a hush when it swallows resin, a sigh when you stop fussing and let it be. Heat strokes your shins, and the cold on your cheeks backs off like 2 weather systems, making a treaty on your face. Historians still wonder if people here preferred to birth new fire most mornings, or to hoard coals under ash like treasure. Rekindling instead of drilling or striking. Likely it changed with place, with weather, with the temper of the camp and the kinds of tinder at hand. Skills overlap and travel the way stories do. And what matters most is not which method wins an argument, but that someone keeps the glow alive on days when everything's wet, and a promise of warmth makes the difference between chatter and silence. You're not here to settle it. You're here to breathe and feed and watch the day lift. The flame grows stout enough to lend itself to other tasks. You rake a couple of smooth river stones to the edge of the coals to warm them through, thinking ahead to water you'll heat by dropping them into a skin bag, the hiss and puff the closest thing you have to a kettle song. A stick you whittled into a feather-thin curls left half-attached weights for its part as an eager little fire ladder should the flame droop. You stir the coals with a charred branch and make a small well in the center. A nest where the heat collects like coins, the kind of budgeting your future self appreciates. Your hands remember dozens of motions that have no names here. How far? To spread twigs for quick air. How to crack a branch quietly across your knee so you don't startle the morning. How to tap ash off a coal without dimming it. How to tilt your head so the smoke blesses your hair and not your eyes. A widely true thing. People have tended hearths for tens of thousands of years. Cooking, warming, keeping watch, telling all the best quiet jokes by firelight. The circle of flame is older than any plan you have, and patient with the way you learn. A quirky thing, resin stuck between finger and thumb smells like citrus and pine and never entirely leaves, even after a dunk in the river. It's your sticky badge of competence. You sit back on your heels and feel warmth lap your face. Through the mat's gap, the sky shifts from pearl to a thin, hopeful blue, and the river's breath answers. Smoke ribboning toward it as if the water were politely tasting the air. Your knees pop again, this time with approval, and the ash gives up a tiny spark that crosses the hearth like a firefly that missed its meat by a few months. You smile, a small curl the fire understands. The morning is not rushing you. It's simply unfolding like bark on a new twig from outside. There's the softest scuff, the kind of sound a futora palm makes when it remembers it exists. You don't look yet. The fire needs 2 more thin sticks and 1 thicker one laid too. Cross like an easy woven mat, and your breath needs 1 more deep, slow draw to remind your bones you're warm. You blow once more, not out of fear, but out of ritual, and the flame bows forward and then stands tall again. The way a greeting might happen between old friends, the scuff resolves into a muzzle, then 2 bright eyes and a wedge of ears, and the reed mat bows as a wolfish dog shoulders through with all the ceremony of a visiting cousin who knows where the good chair is. He yawns, first ridiculously wide pink tongue curling in. The sound is half sigh, half door creak, the sort that makes your own jaw try it on without asking. Contagious yawns. You already share habits. He noses your palm where resin still shines, decides your fingers smell interesting and maybe edible, and drops his chin on your shin like you've been hired as a pillow. Fur presses warm against your calf, coarse on top with a soft underlayer that kept him perfectly fine outside. While the mist stitched beads into his coat, he smells like smoke, wet grass, and last night's fish heads, which is somehow not terrible. Or maybe your nose is on a different plan this morning. He sneezes delicately, a pew of a sound, and the spray catches morning light in tiny prisms. There's a thump 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 of tail against reed 1, 2, 3, his version of good morning, and also a firm notice that you are late to scratching behind the ear. You oblige. Your hand remembers the way his skull narrows to the nape, the spot between shoulder blades where winter still lingers in a thicker patch. the place that makes his eyes half close like shutters at noon. He is not a wolf, not exactly his. Face is shorter, his teeth a shade smaller than a wolf's long knives. His eyes tuned to watch yours, the way water watches shore. Dogs are the first animals to move into human mornings like this, the original housemates. By this age of the world, our species has been sharing firelight with theirs for a long stretch of nights. There are burials from around now where a person rests with a puppy tucked under their hand, sprinkled with ochre as if color were a blanket. Some dogs even show healed sickness in their bones that says someone kept them alive through bad days. That is a quiet fact you could put your palm on. Care travels both ways. Outside, camp does its own stretching. A cough, low and rumbly, like a log deciding whether to be flame. A gait, old ankles, careful feet pads, past and pauses to listen to your fire, the way people listen to weather. Reed walls whisper to each other as a second shelter opens. The river chuckles under it, all like someone reading a story to themselves. Somewhere, a child chirps and is answered by a murmured hush. A stone clicks against another stone napper's punctuation, then clicks again, pleased with its own edge. Without mugs, there's no clatter of cups. Without alarms, there's no beeping. The morning announces itself in breath and little noises. A language you didn't know you remembered. The dog lifts his head at each sound, ears tilting like tiny paddles catching current. His tail slows to a sway. He walks to the doorway, plants himself in the gap you made for the smoke, and sits as if stationed by a law of physics. Dog and door equals camp engaged. He is the first line of hearing, the second line of smell, the original notification bell, with a wet nose and the confidence of someone who thinks he invented vigilance. He leans gently against your shin again, claiming you and the threshold at the same time. Your neighbor's steps soft crunch on dew. She pauses by your mat, gives the dog a 2-finger hello at the cheek-earned privilege, and nods once at your flame. It's the camp morning meeting. All agendas begin with fire and end with water, and the intervening business is handled with hands, shoulders, glances. She lifts a small plate of corded yesterday's nettle, now smooth, and strong end, loops it once, twice, testing. You see a stack of baskets at the edge of her shelter, patched and mended. The way days patch and mend around need. The dog watches her too, curious but polite, which is an achievement when your species belongs to a lineage famous for sniffing first and thinking later. Historians still wonder if dogs came close by, choice camp wolves sidling in to share scraps and safety, or if people brought wolf pups into the circle and crazed them until the circle felt unfinished without them. The origin might not be a single arrow, but a bundle of paths. Different groups, different wolves, different fires, all making the same bargain in slow motion. There is even talk of dogs emerging from more than one place, threads weaving together. As people moved and met, your dog yawns again, spectacularly unbothered by academic puzzles. You try the yawn back at him, slow and exaggerated, and sure enough, his mouth creaks in sympathy. It's silly and also a neat trick. He catches your rhythm the way he'll catch your gaze when you flick it toward the meadow. You test it eyes to the river, eyes to the reeds, and watch him track each cue as if you are two instruments tuning to the same note. You are a person with a dog. There are no computers, but you have the world's earliest user interface, and it runs on glances and crumbs. The fire pops in a friendly way and pushes a little more warmth over your knees. Two heated stones you tucked at the edge are glowing with that muted inner light that means they'll hiss happily when dropped into a water bag later. The dog noses the boundary of heat, then curls into the sweet spot where shins get warm and noses stay cool. He tucks his tail over his toes and rests his chin on one paw. Not sleeping yet, just letting the day soak in through his fur. A short bark comes from farther down the bank alert. Not alarmed him, your dog answers without lifting his head. A low woof that carries. I heard, and we're fine, in one syllable. Beyond, you hear the tick of a fish in the shallows and a small soft splash that is not fish at all, but a neighbor testing the edge of the water with the toe of a sandal to see how keen the river feels about lending you some of its morning. A skin bag size, and you imagine the calculation. Enough for a sip now, enough to rinse ash from fingers, enough to stretch until someone fills it again. The dog's ears say, in dog, that water walks toward you soon, which is a big opinion from an animal that would gladly drink a puddle labeled unreliable. You scratch his chest in small absent circles. Your palm moves to his collar well, not a collar in the metal buckle sense, just a plaited thong, soft with oil and smoke, decorated with a single pierced shell that clacks against itself when he shakes. It's not just for control. It's a pocket-sized story that says this dog is someone's, which is to say yours, which is to say the camp's. He tolerates the shell because it means more scratches and occasionally a scrap earlier and strictly necessary. Negotiation is one of his best languages. A widely accepted thought drifts through the camp as easily as smoke. Dogs make hunting different. They nose trails you miss, crease the air with meaning you can read by watching their shoulders, tell you where deer paused and where boar broke into a trot. This is not a hunting morning for you, but even in the quiet dogs, senses guard your edges. Even gloves hadn't been invented, but you have a living glove of awareness draped across your ankles. Your neighbor with the cordage crouches to the fire, crumbles a bit of old charcoal into a leaf, and draws a quick black line on her thumb to measure thickness as she splices a new length into the old. The dog watches her hands, as if rope might become sausage if he believes hard enough. When you whistle just a soft two-note thing without urgency, he flicks an ear, then scoots his chin back to your ankle. His decision-making process is transparent, and mostly about which place gets the maximum of both warmth and your approval. Another small sound, the first real voice of the day. Not words, exactly, just a shared a rising acknowledgement that the dark's grip has slackened and the work that never presses, but always waits, will begin. Someone pulls a hide over a shoulder and steps out, yawning like the dog, fist against mouth. You all look the same, waking up, a blur of smoke-scent hair, creases on cheeks. A small, testy negotiation between bones and morning that has nothing to do with age and everything to do with gravity. A baby reconsiders whether to be a baby and decides yes, which comes out as a squeak. A reed flute answers with a few notes, as if to say, "All right then." The dog lifts to stand, shakes from head to tail, so that his skin ripples under fur-like. Wind passing over grass, and every single loose drop flies to glint in the gap of your doorway. It's a sound like a short rain on a very small roof. The shell on his thong clicks twice. He looks pleased with himself, as if he invented physics. You tell him he did, which he accepts without argument. Historians still wonder whether people taught dogs to guard first, or if dogs taught people to sleep deeply by taking the first watch. You lean toward the second because you've seen how his body arranges itself by the doorway. One ear oriented toward the path, one toward the water, nose aimed where scent will be richest, paws ready and also relaxed. He will wake you if the world changes, will not wake you if a beetle sneezes. You trust this more than any lock? He pads 2 steps out and stares very hard at a patch of reeds that contains a vole, a shadow, or nothing at all. His stare is a tool. The camp has learned to look where he looks, and you look too. An automatic pivot as natural as breathing. When nothing further happens, you both release the tension like slackening a bow, and you feel a small fizz of satisfaction at having practiced the skill of not worrying. It is underrated. He noses a charred stick and decides it doesn't need to be fetched, which is gracious. He noses your hand again and decides it needs to be licked, which is arguable. His tongue is warm and surprisingly soft, a tiny wash of river and ash and dog that leaves a clean feeling only because you choose to believe in dog. Antiseptic properties this morning. You pat the same spot on his chest he offered before, and he gives you a redactable little grunt that starts in his ribs and ends in his throat. The canine version of there, that's the one. Somewhere in this continent, sun lifts behind a ridge you won't see for hours. But here, light thickens. By degrees, the camp's shadows soften. The smoke thread silvered a moment ago turns a more transparent white. Your breath fog thins and then stops. A crane complains at the river, a single syllable in a long language of long legs. The dog angles his head and makes a chuff you've learned means large bird. Not a problem, but let's all be aware. You assure him you will put it in the minutes. He approves. If the camp had an office, he would be middle management with a very good nose. You think briefly of how many hands and mornings made this partnership. There are people farther north who walk with dogs through knee-high snow, people west who learn to read pricked ears under stars brighter than you can imagine, people south who nurse pups on milk someone spared that they could have used themselves. We are a long web, and dogs are a warm thread in it. The first dog to drag a bone toward a fire probably discovered not only better flavor, but better company. The first person to let it happen discovered naps that didn't end in surprises. Your neighbor stands, cord looped and even, and lifts to empty baskets. She raises her brows at you a tiny question. The loop along the river now, you shake your head once a tiny answer. Soon, yes, but first the sky. She nods and moves on, feet whispering in the new grass. The dog watches her go, then looks back at you and sits, a tidy punctuation mark that says he'll match your pace. He is not in a hurry, very good teacher. You rest your hand on his head and feel the heat of him, a banked coal under fur. He blinks, slow. Somewhere in the striped edge of the shelter, the soot dots you named earlier have become less dark as the light climbs. And if you squint, you can still make out the salmon's eye, the bent stick, the sleepy dog. He does not know. His name is written on the ceiling. He does know that your fingers make a better scratch when you're smiling. He encourages this by leaning into your palm until he is essentially holding your hand with his forehead. You will read the morning soon in the sky's face, in the moon's tilt, and the last spoken star. For now, the dog is your first instrument, and the camp is your second. Both tune to this river, this reed mat, this ongoing joke of being alive without coffee. Geese loft past and shout a dramatic update to absolutely everyone, which is the avian version of reply all. You and the dog. Do not reply. You have nothing urgent to add. You tilt your face toward the thinning dark, letting your eyes soften until the last points of night hold still. The dog leans against your shin like a bookmark, keeping your place while you scan the sky's slow script. Above the river's pale breath, the moon stands to one side, a chipped bowl with its bright edge tilted just so. You learn a lot from its angle. A thin moon, riding low, tells you have a pocket of morning before the sun spills. A fuller curve would have dragged you up earlier with its glare. You match your lungs to the river and read your hour without numbers west of the moon. A small spray of cold glitter pulls your eye to tight cluster. Some will later call the Seven, a gathering that once told people when to plant and when to pull cloaks closer. Higher up sits a neat row of 3 sparks, fading now, sinking into the blue. You don't pronounce names. You just note where they slide and how fast, and tuck that into your morning like the first sip of a story. Near the horizon, a brutal diamond outshines everything. So bright, it looks like it's trying too hard. You have met it before, and you will meet it again. The morning star, that isn't a star, but a planet that loves to rise early and steal the show. Venus coaches the day out of bed, and on clear mornings, you can read the river ripples by it. A widely true thing. People have watched Venus and the moon dance these routines long before villages, tracking their patterns with notches, tallies, and remembered songs. They're the original calendar duo that never needed batteries. You listen because the sky isn't the only clock. A wren tries out its opening paragraph from the willow snag, a rushing tiny river of notes. A thrush gives 2 clear syllables from the meadow, like a polite knock. The crane, perpetually opinionated, contributes a honk that sounds like an old door being asked to try romance. When the wrens get bold and the thrush steps closer, you know the sun is not far under the hill. The dog tilts his head because birds, in his opinion, are either a game or a news bulletin. In either way, he is subscribed. You hold your palm up and test the old rule. When you can see the faintest lines on your skin without squinting, the day has crossed one more invisible border. White thread against dark thread would do the same if you had either, but your hand's map works fine. You glance at a cord you left tied to the reed frame. The knot's shadow used to be a small pool, and now it's a thin twig of dark thinning, telling you how fast the light crawls. Your version of a smartwatch is a knot and a wrist that remembers. Last evening, before the light went soft, you planted a straight stick in a patch of sand and set a pebble where the tip of the shadow lay. You'll mark it again later. Over days, those pebbles make a shallow curve that shows where the sun walks the horizon this season. Historians still wonder if groups like yours set up sightlines posts, forked branches, a notch in a ridge to catch sunrise extremes, the way later stone rings will, or if the task lived entirely in moving hands and minds. You do it with sand, because sand travels when you do. The breeze carries the scent of cold water and old leaves, a minty hint where a crushed plant rubbed your ankle yesterday and still remembers itself. Spiderwebs along the doorway are stitched with dew, jeweled enough to make a queen jealous. And that wet glitter says the night was clear and still. If webs hang dry at dawn, something's stirring the air more than you are. The dog tests the wind by opening his mouth in a doggy smile and letting the world blow across his tongue. A method you try once and immediately place in the category of great for dogs, less great for you. You pinch a tuft of last year's milkweed floss from a small bundle near the hearth. Hunter taught you this trick and let the silky seeds loose at the doorway. They drift, wander, then choose a path along the river's course, barely moving. That tells you what the smoke told you. Wind is staying out of your business for a while. A quirky note you enjoy. A single seed will sometimes hover over a warm rock, like it can't decide whether to land or dream. A tiny traveler stuck between two plans. You're on Team Dream this morning. Back up in that thinning dark. The seven sink toward the trees. When those little sisters rise just before dawn in the colder months, you pull hides closer and you find fatwood more carefully. When they disappear into twilight on summer evenings, you know berries are plotting their ambush. Many peoples have used that cluster and the moon's cycle as faithful markers, season clocks that sing instead of tick. You're not composing a treatise, you're composing breakfast plans, but the sky gives you the framework, and you fit the day's small beads onto it in order. Your to-do list is written in dew. The grasses leaning toward the river remind you where the path is slick. The clay bank's darker seam warns where it will take your ankle hostage if you step on it too boldly. The frost rhymes still silver on. The shaded bank says you'd like to keep your feet on the sunlit sand when you can. The goose committee passes overhead and leaves several strongly worded memos about the state of the marsh. You don't have calendar invites, but the sky RSVPs for you in font size, gigantic. You take half a step into the open and let the horizon find you. The clouds, thin as hand-smoothed clay, are brushed to the east, as if someone dragged an open palm through a heap of flour. Higher winds, you think, moving one way, while the river-level breeze waits. That means a later gustiness you'll prefer to be done cooking before. You absorb this with the same quiet interest you give to a neighbor's tidying. Good to know, not your circus yet. Your shadow lies long and faint, a gray cousin at your heels, and the dog bumps it with his nose, surprised, as if it might squeak. You test the moon again, tip of the bright part pointing like an arrow toward where the sun will lift. If you are being poetic some mornings insist you'd say the moon is handing the day to you, like a bowl of light you will not drop. The dog sits, a clean period, at the end of the sentence, and blinks. You roll your shoulders and feel the hush of readiness settle. Water, then grain, then hands and voices. The sky closes its book for now and hands you back your small, useful chores. Time to move without hurrying. For now, you take up the skin bag by its soft neck, the thong cutting a familiar arc across your palm, and hook the pitch-lined basket over your forearm. The dog stands instantly, body drawing a tidy line from nose to tail as if he's been practicing this pose just for your approval. Embers settle behind you with a cat-like sigh. You step out onto the reed-scratched path, feet remembering where the dew holds fast on the grass and where the clay likes to pretend it's solid until it isn't. Water is a morning errand here, not a faucet. You go to it the way you go to sunrise. Dew sets tiny galaxies on every blade, and the first step dampens your ankle wraps with a pleasant shock that your skin reads as honesty. Spider silk catches across your knuckles like a greeting ribbon, and you apologize to the engineering by lifting it to a twig. The dog precedes you in an efficient zigzag, sampling the headlines. Vole, old fish, last night's heron parade. Cranes bugle a few bends down, a brassy announcement that would be more dignified if it weren't also a little nasal. Frog supply. The gossip column, a blip-blip chorus that sounds like a pot coming to a simmer with opinions. Your stride falls into that loose gait that balances basket, bag, and your sense of humor, flat stepping stones, lift from the mud where hands set them months ago, shiny with use, and you test each with your toes. One wobbles, and you back your weight off, recenter, and then trust it anyway. Mornings, balance exercise, complementary with river access. The path dips, then rolls up a little shoulder of sand where fresh goose tracks scribble over your old ones. The dog places his feet delicately around the webbed mess with an expression that suggests he would have edited. The geese, if invited to the meeting. At the water's edge, the river cools the air another notch, and your hands anticipate the touch before your knees even begin to bend. You kneel on the small mat of dry grasses you keep stashed under a willow root for exactly this moment. A luxury that saves your knees from cold grit and your future self from inventing new vocabulary. You push reeds aside to make a clean window, then slide the basket into the shallow, letting the current rinse last night's dust and stray ash from its weave. Pitch darkens, shining. The basket's fiber drinks and then refuses, sealed by resin and ash, the way your skin is sealed by smoke. It's a widely known truth that before pottery is common here, water rides home in skins and baskets, and heat for cooking often arrives by stone, not pot. Smooth rocks warmed in the fire and carried to liquid so they hiss and share their stored summer. You don't argue with old solutions, especially when they make that satisfying song of heat meeting water. You hold the skin bag by the neck, open it with your knuckles, and use a scallop shell to scoop 1, 2, 3 dippers into its soft mouth, the cold licking your bones with each pour. The resin on the basket holds a scent that always surprises you. Pine and smoke with a bright, almost citrus note that makes your nose think of sun on needles. You know, the trick of tempering resin with fine charcoal or powdered ash, stirring with a stick until it thickens like a promise, then wiping it into every seam. If it cracks, you warm it and smooth another layer. Even press with your thumb so your fingerprint goes traveling with the water as a tiny private signature. A quirky pleasure. Some people soften resin by chewing it first, spitting it out glossy and workable. The dog finds this absolutely fascinating and deeply unfair. He slurps from a puddle upstream because he is a citizen with standards, and also because you told him twice with a look. His ears swivel, catching the way reeds move, where a water vole decides your conversation is too loud. Dragonflies telegraph metallic glints over the surface. Scouting routes the sun will fill in later. A single trout's back breaks the skin of the river and leaves a ring that reaches your fingers, cool as a surprised breath. Bare hands in that water feel like a contract. Your palms turn a pale pink, then red. You curl your fingers under and let the cold eat through the sleepy places in your head that the fire couldn't reach. You don't linger long. The bag goes heavy, a friendly anchor. You press air out of its neck and twist, then fold and toggle it with a smooth bit of antler that lives on a tether exactly for this. The toggle sits against the twist like a tidy knot, one of those small technologies that always feels like a magic trick, even when you're the one doing it. The dog looks impressed for approximately 2 seconds, and then remembers a snail. He touches it with his nose, decides it is not today's task, and keeps watch instead. Downstream, reeds lean in a line you know by heart. Under that green gate, a row of stakes waits in the shallows. A fish where you'll check later on your loop if the day allows. The river knows you've been negotiating with it for generations, sometimes with hands, sometimes with woven hurdles that guide rather than trap. Nearby, a beaver slide glistens in a slick path where mud remembers a night. Belly. The dog admires it and leaves it alone. Good sense at war with curiosity and winning by a whisker. You re-wet the basket because a damp basket takes water more gracefully and fill it to an inch below the pitch line, just enough to carry without sloshy drama. It's not a container for travel. It's for the short walk, the set down near the hearth, the rinse of a hand, the fast ladle for a neighbor who didn't plan ahead and thinks maybe you planned enough for two. You lift, adjust, then settle the strap across your forehead so the weight sits along your spine instead of tugging your shoulders forward. Congratulations, you invented posture therapy without a studio membership. Historians still wonder how routinely people boiled water for drinking in a time when rivers like this ran freer and clearer, when camp placement did half the hygiene for you. Some say boiling was mostly for cooking and steeping, not for sterilizing. Others point to stone boiling hearths and charred residues that hint at habitual hot drinks long before any clay cup. The record keeps the potsherds and the hearths, but eats the steam. So the debate simmers like a pot you can smell but not see. Your practice is pragmatic. If someone upstream has been stomping through mud, you drop hot stones in and let the water sing before you sip. You shift your feet and feel the way the wet sand molds around your toes. Cool holding. Overhead, the cranes reposition into important triangles and shout editorial notes about it. Frogs step the rhythm faster. The dog checks behind you, and then again, the loop of a century patterned into his bones. You start back along the stones, putting weight where the river has polished them to a safe mat, avoiding the ones that glitter to slick. One wobble, one small arm wave ballet, and you re-find your center. If you had an audience, it would clap politely. You have a dog. He pretends not to see your performance, which is somehow kinder. On the bank, horsetail plants bristle in a tuft like tiny green bottle brushes. You snap one and tuck it in your basket. Later, you'll use it with a handful of sand as a scrubber. Horsetails, rough with silica and shines bone. Hides and wooden bowls, better than any cloth. A Stone Age sponge with botanical flair. The dog approves anything that means you'll be near the hearth longer, which, in his mind, increases the likelihood of falling snacks by 400% back in camp range. Voices embroider the air. Low travel, soft conversation that skips like pebbles. A neighbor's laugh. A chiding hush to a toddler who would like to explore the concept of fire with both hands. A clack of stone answered by stone. You set the basket down gently, tilt the skin bag against a shoulder and then to the ground, and feel your spine lengthen in thanks. The heated river stones you parked by the coals earlier glow with a color you trust. With a split stick, you lift one and plunk it into the basket water. It hisses, a tiny thunder, and steam breathes up your wrist with a warmth that feels like applause. The dog squints at the steam, then steps closer to bless it with his nose. He sneezes once and then decides he invented this too. You add a second stone. The hiss becomes a rolling murmur, and the basket's pitch takes it fine. No scent of burning, just the sweetness of resin and the neutral mineral of hot river. You could steep leaves, later mint, if someone brings it in from the shade. Or willow, if someone's bones complain, but for now, the water's heat is its own kindness. You rinse your hands and watch the tiny eddies carry away ash ghosts and pitch shine, until skin reads like skin again. some mornings for long days away from camp. People will carry water in other ways. A clean stomach, tied neat as a balloon. A bladder, tough and transparent. Even a hollowed gourd, if your cousins from farther river bends traded one into the circle. Those are all possible containers. What you have are the ones your hands know best today. In the dog's opinion that the nearest water is the correct water unless told otherwise. He lies down with his paws just inside the patch of warmed dirt. A perfect calculation of comfort and duty. You lift the warmed basket and splash a little over the hearthstones to settle dust, then set it within reach. The sky is past pearl now, turning a pale rinsed blue. Your breath is ordinary again, not visible. The river's breath is still visible, slow. You consider adding a third stone greedy for heat, like anyone in a chilly morning, and decide 2 is perfect. 3 is a flex. The steam thins into nothing as the water climbs to warmth, ready to say yes to grain. The dog puts his nose on your knee and looks at you the way someone does when they know the next part of the morning by heart. You feel the smooth face of the grinding slab call like a familiar shoulder. The basket's weight, the skin bag's cool curve, the risen steam, all of it lines up behind the next small tasks. Your palms remembered the way the handstone fits, the way seed and nut turn to meal with patience and push, the way warm water transforms dust to something that says breakfast without ceremony. The river waits behind you, content with its own chores. You scratch the dog under the chin once more, soft, and by the hearth's low voice, you set the basket down where your hands can find it. Without looking, the grinding slab sits where you left it, a shoulder-wide oval of stone that remembers every breakfast you've ever asked of it. Its surface is silky from years of small circles, like a river taught it to be polite. You wet your palm and smooth a dark line down the middle habit care. A tiny bow to the work hand, set the hand stone. In that lane, it fits your grip because you've been teaching each other for seasons. Your fingers shape the stone, and the stone shapes your morning. You unwrap a little leather pouch and pour out what looks, to an untrained eye, like a handful of very determined dust. To you, it's a well-sorted mix. Wild barley with its husks already rubbed off yesterday over someone's joke. A scatter of goosefoot seeds you shook into your pouch during last week's loop. A pinch of dock and knotgrass because you're an opportunist. And 3 hazelnuts for richness, tucked in like lucky coins. If cattail pollen were in season, you'd add a golden breath of it for lightness and bragging rights. But today the swamp hasn't powdered itself yet, and you are content with ordinary excellence. You tap the grain into a shallow furrow on the slab and start the rhythm. Press, pull, press, pull. The handstone slides with a low, sandy note. The world's oldest white noise machine, set to oatmeal. Your shoulders drop into it. Your breath pairs up, and a little warmth blooms under. Your palms as starch and stone talk to each other. The dog watches like it's a performance art piece, head tilted, ears flicking to the tempo. Every few passes, you lift the stone and sweep the meal into a neat ridge with a flat piece of rib bone, so the coarser bits come back to the front of the class and learn again. Now and then, a grain pops and sings a tiny toast on the warm stone. You grin without meaning to. The smell leans toward nutty, toward a promise. You crack the hazelnuts with a quick, efficient tap into a shallow dimple of a nutting stone. One of those pebbles whose small hollows come from years of letting hard shells learn humility. The dog perks at the sound. The crack is his. Favorite Balland, you share a small fragment. Because partnerships are greased with generosity. And yes, because his eyebrows are persuasive. He eats it with theatrical delicacy and then looks at you as if to say, "That was brave of you to try. Please let me supervise further." You pause to winnow a little because chaff tastes like you forgot the rest of breakfast. From a wide, shallow basket, you lift a pinch high and let it fall. The almost not there breeze sneaks the papery husks sideways while the heavier seed drops straight into the bowl you keep between your knees. It's a gentle sleight of hand with air, playable even when the wind refuses to show up. A few husks stick to your forearms and glitter. The dog tries to catch one because it looks like it might be food, and you tell him kindly that not everything is food. He files this under inconclusive, a widely known thing, and you can feel it in your hands. People grind wild grains and nuts on stones like these for thousands of years before farming has a name, turning seed in time into something softer that sits well in the belly and better in the day. A lesser known pleasure when you've done enough grinding in one place. The slab's sheen is its own map glassy, where seeds and silica polished it, matte at the edges where you rarely go. You can find home again by the feel of that shine. Alone, even half asleep. The meal gathers in a soft drift, a small dune of future comfort. You pinch a bit and taste it. It's toothsome, sweet in the way fresh grain is sweet, with a whisper of smoke from the days this stone sat near the hearth and learned to smell like you. There is also the faintest grit sand, stone flour, life which dentists of a far future will discuss at length when they meet your teeth in their studies. But for now, it is just texture, the original crunchy topping. You pass a little to the dog on your fingertip. He tastes it and decides it is edible only once it is warm and when you are not watching. You slide a thin, flat stone closer to the coals and scatter a tablespoon of the meal on it to toast. The scent rises immediately nutty. Richer, a hint of popcorn pretending to be sophisticated dans. You fold it into the rest with a stick, turning your future porridge from earnest to fragrant. In the warmed basket, your two river stones are still humming their low song. You dip a shell in and watch steam swaddle your knuckles. The dog's whiskers tilt forward as if they can read temperature. Time to mix. Make a well in the meal. Pour in warm water and start stirring with a stick smoothed at the end. From exactly this job. It thickens with the gentle certainty of a tide. You add a few more pinches of meal to chase the perfect consistency somewhere between can be. eaten with a shell, and could be carried as a building material. You lower one hot stone into the basket with split sticks. Listen for that little hiss that says the water stays friendly, and set the basket near enough to the fire to keep the heat, but far enough to keep the pitch unalarmed. Basket cooking is the non-stick technology you were born into. The porridge begins to sigh, tiny blups at the edges, and the surface blooms small pits like a plain face breaking into freckles. You stir without scraping the basket, keeping the stone rolling in a gentle circuit so it doesn't scorch its own little cave. A few berries from yesterday's prize bush roll into your palm as if they were absolutely planned. You drop them in. They burst like polite fireworks and leave streaks of wine-colored cheer across the beige. No trail of packaging, just grain, water, warmth, and the idea that comfort can be made with very few ingredients. If this came with a label, it would read, "Content seeds, river, patience." The dog inches forward 2 centimeters at a time, pretending his body is a glacier and you can't perceive movement at that speed. When his chin rests on your knee, you pretend not to see him either, and the two of you maintain diplomatic relations through mutually beneficial denial. You scoop a spoonful with a shell, blow twice, and test. It's hot enough to make you honest. It coats your ribs from the inside with a kindness that feels like someone who knows you folded a blanket there. You set a pinch aside too cool for the dog, and he waits heroically for the second your attention moves so he can discover it. Across the camp, a neighbor claps ash from her hands and looks your way with raised brows. You lift the shell in offering, and she nods. Lateran taps her chest where hunger lives. You nod back. There is enough. There is often enough when everyone's hands are in it. You reach for a small twist of dried berries from last moon and crumble a few in because you are fancy today. And also because breakfast likes a story it can tell in color. Historians still wonder how central wild cereals were 2 mornings like. This daily staple or seasonal grace. Some camps leave behind grinding stones worn thin and charred crumbs that smell like pancakes whenever archaeologists warm them, suggesting a lot of mornings were like yours. Other camps show more bones, more shell, a different rhythm. The truth may be like your porridge, made of many small things, stirred together until they become one comfort. They are also still debating whether the earliest flatbreads, those charred, seed fleck circles were festival food or just another Tuesday. You feel strongly that any day with warm breakfast counts as a festival, a quirky technique you like to show off to yourself. You take a sliver of hot stone out with your split sticks, roll it across a smeared circle of thick batter on the flat, rock, and coax a little cake into being. It lifts clean, as if it wants to be held, edges crisped, middle soft. You flip it with a twig, and the dog's ears do a little dance at the sound. The cake smells like a toaster learned humility. You break off a corner, touch it to a berry streak, and reflect that you have invented brunch without inventing words. like brunch. You taste smoke in everything, which would be a disaster for a modern kitchen. But here's the flavor of surviving with style. The porridge deepens as it stands. The hot stones hum lowers. Your shoulders find the end of there. Slow circle and sit with satisfaction. A widely true note hums in your head while you eat. Groundstone tools matatas, corn's handstones, are the fingerprints of settled mornings across continents. Evidence that many human days begin like this, with pressure, patience, and small, reliable calories. Your hands are part of that long line, and you feel taller for it, even while sitting on your heels. You scrape the handstone clean with a pinch of damp meal, the same way you always do, because a clean tool is a friendly tool. You rub a bit of horsetail over the slab with sand and water, tiny circles within the big ones you just finished. And the stone flashes back its old shine. You wipe your stirring stick and lay it where it will dry straight. You lift the hot stone back to the hearth edge to rest. Its skin crazed with the fine cracks of a career well lived. Pot boilers, some will call them, and they do have a way of dying spectacularly when pretended to be immortal. You thank this one with a nod anyway. The dog finishes his allotted corner of cake and performs the ancient ritual of pretending he has not eaten at all, and perhaps the gods forgot to serve him. You kiss 2 fingers to his head and inform him gently that the gods keep records. He sighs, defeated but loyal. A crane honks as if to second your judgment. Somewhere, a child claps at nothing and is right to do so. You fold the pouch of meal closed, tighten the thong, and tuck it back on its shelf. The basket water now reads warm, not hot. So you sip, wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, and give the rest a swirl over the slab to lift the last dust into kindness. The air in the shelter tastes of grain and resin and pleased fire. Outside, the sky climbs from rinsed to real blue. You set the empty shell against the wall, where you'll see it later without looking. Your stomach settles with the kind of yes that simplifies the next few hours. The dog licks a paw with scholarly interest. The handstone waits like a heavy moon in a shallow cradle of woven reed. You'll dress next. Pull soft hide up your shins. Knot cords. Slide a sling into its loop. Hang your small bead so it can catch a fragment of sun when the day is generous. For now, you run your palm once more down the slab and feel the thin, damp chill your hand leaves behind, like a signature you share with the stone. And breathe in a final ribbon of porridge steam that curls itself into the smell of your hair. You pull the soft hide up your shins. The nap turned inward, so it kisses the skin and the smoked side out, where damp will think twice. The laces are thong, cut thin and strong from leg sinew, and softened by patient hands. You loop them in a cross, then a figure 8 around your ankles until the wrap sits snug without pinching. Foot coverings wait by the hearth moccasin plain, just 2 pieces stitched and turned them. You tuck dry grass inside as a lining because comfort is a technology too. The dog supervises closely, shedding precisely 6 hairs onto the toe so your outfit can be considered complete. Your belt is a braid of bast fiber and leather strips that remembers your waist better than you do. You slide it through a loop on your tunic hide, softened and worked with smoke until it hangs like a patient friend, then cinch with an antler toggle. You carved into a shape that pleases your thumb. Pockets aren't invented as a concept. With pouches and they work just fine. Into those go the morning kit. The flint shard wrapped in bark, a curl of resin, a little roll of sinew thread, the bone needle in a reed tube, and 2 polished stones that are better for throwing than they look. It's your minimalist EDC. And yes, the pouch creaks like it has opinions. You finger the seam down your sleeve and admire the even pricks, tiny moons where a bone needle passed with a thread of split sinew. That needle is a marvel, fine with a drilled eye that took someone a long breath and a patient wrist. Widely known and true people have been stitching with bone needles for tens of millennia, making fitted clothing for cold and damp, long before words like tailor showed up. You press your thumb against the seam allowance and feel how each stitch bites just enough, and all waits nearby, a tool you use to open holes without tearing, the way you open conversations when you are smart. There's a saying in camp, half practical, half myth. Each animal carries enough brains to tan its own hide. Rude, but accurate, and brain tan leather smells faintly sweet, like smoke taught to be kind. You run your knuckles over the sleeve and remember the work that lives in it, scraping, stretching, rubbing fat in, and persuading the fibers to relax into softness, then smoking it so the weather won't undo your hours at the first mist. The smoke leaves a memory in the hide, a scent that lingers like a gentle shield against insects and rain. Deodorant. Haute couture. You twist fresh cord because your hands like to start days with small, tidy spirals. Nettle. Fibers pulled from stalks you retted and scraped. Twist into to ply under your thumb and thigh, rolling one way then the other, the 2 directions locking like quiet friends. Sometimes you use dogbane or lime bast. Sometimes you use the tough outer skin of willow, lesser known delight. Nettle makes a surprisingly silky line if you take the sting out with due and patience. And even then, you feel like you got away with something. You splice lengths together invisibly and drop the finished cord in a coil that sits in your palm like a sleeping snake. The sling gets a once-over next your favorite boring tool or kitchen timer than weapon in a morning like this. 2 cords, a simple cradle woven from split bark and fiber. The whole thing no bigger than your hand when folded. You nestle a smooth river pebble in the cradle and give the sling a lazy swing, just enough to hear the faint whistle and watch the dog try to track the sound to the pebble's feelings. He tilts his head. You promise him you won't test geese, not before breakfast round 2. Widely used and widely loved, slings live in hands across continents. Yours coils at your belt, like a thought you might use later. Adornment now, 'cause people were people, even when the nearest boutique was a shell bed. You thumb a pierced shell that traveled from far water along a chain of trades and hands. Hang it from a thong around your neck and feel it knock lightly against the notch of your sternum when you breathe. That shell proves a quiet fact. Ornaments and ideas move through camps faster and farther than footsteps alone would suggest. You work a smudge of red ochre along your cheekbone with a wet fingertip, not a stripe so much as a whisper. Its practical sun glare is less bossy. Bugs like you a little less sand. It's also decoration, which is to say, mood management. Style is older than buttons, and probably kinder. Your hair gets braided with a strip of bast and a two-stick. Pin slides in to hold the coil away from spark and soup. You rub a dab of fat along your cheekbones and knuckles, the original skincare routine, and it softens the traces of grinding stone in cold water. The dog leans in and approves the product. Historians still wonder if lines of ochre and shell, patterns were signals, clan, season, a language of who's who're, just the same glorious mix of I like it and it helps that you feel this morning. It's not mutually exclusive. Most good design solves more than one problem. You check your moccasins again. Push the grass into the corners and cinch the ankle thong under the cross-lacing so nothing catches. A small trick the old ones teach. Tuck a twist of fresh sedge under your arch 2-wick damp. Replace it at midday and you become the kind of person whose feet don't argue. The soul is soft enough to feel where the ground is honest and where it pretends. Obliging, say they will be on your side today, as long as you return the favor. The dog does a small prance in place when you bounce once, reading your pre-walk stretch as a conversation about tenture. Your cloak is a rectangle of smoked hide with a narrow tie at the tentacle and an antler toggle that sits off center like you planned it. Fringe along one edge carries small charms, a crow's feather, 2 beads of bone, a sliver of polished amber traded from people who live with bigger trees. The fringe is not just pretty. It dries faster and channels rain so the center stays warm. If you need shade later, this becomes a small roof. If you need privacy, a door. If you need a pillow, your arm still works, but this helps. You lift the edge and breathe the smoke, a familiar house smell that follows you like a loyal dog, which inconveniently is also following you. You look a little like everyone and exactly like yourself. The same toolkit, the same materials, but your hand in the seam, your preference in the bead, your humor in the way the cord sits with a quiet twist instead of a strict straight line. Historians still wonder whether decorated hides and fancy stitching were everyday wear or saved for rituals. The record keeps the needles and the pierced shells, the ochre stains at hearths and on bones, but eats the cloth and leather unless they were very lucky. Clay sometimes remembers imprints of baskets and cord where a lump dried against them. Teasing at a whole wardrobe we mostly can't see, you look down at your own shoulder and see proof that wardrobes are mostly made of touch and time. The dog noses your bead, decides it is not food, and approves anyway. He shakes, collar shell clicking like a soft chime, and you catch the cord. At your waist, so it doesn't slap your hip. Your hands check everything by feel. Toggle, knot, pouch, sling, strap. Nothing pinches, nothing flaps. You're dressed for a day that doesn't care what you call it, only that you meet it with layered usefulness. You give your sleeve one last smoothing stroke, and with the hearth at your back and the reed mat whispering as you brush past, you step toward where footprints and plans begin to look more and more like the same thing. You step into the morning like it's a long sentence you already know how to finish. One foot, then the other, the reed mat closing softly behind you. The dog is at your knee, a comma you can count on. Your belt sits right, sling kisses your hip with its light weight. Your hands fall into the habit of carrying nothing and noticing everything. The path toward the river settles under your soles in the places where grass has learned your shape. And when the earth turns to damp sand, your steps lighten all on their own, as if the ground set your shoes to airplane mode. The first prints are yours, pressed shallow and already paler at the edges where the sun has started to consider involvement. The second set is the dog's two neat pairs, crisp in the toe pads, claws speaking punctuation. Between them runs a fine line where his tail wrote a short note to the morning. You read the other writing too, a heron's sewed stitch marks. In the mud near the curve, a looping script that says it stopped in thought and then disagreed with itself. Two tiny parallel dotted lines near the bankful, in a hurry, pausing to reconsider the water policy. And farther up, the soft heart shape of a deer's split hoof, tup. The point pressed clean into the damp as if it signed its name. You head for the first. Telltale you set last evening, a bent twig propped against a stone where a rabbit path squeezes. Under willow, it's your prehistoric push notification. Still standing means nothing went through with enough enthusiasm to knock it aside. You look either way along the tiny tunnel of green, spot the place where hair polished bark to a polite shine, and then crouch to check the snare. The loop you twisted from dogbane and nettle is still round and waiting. The trigger stick angled just so. You touch it lightly. It trembles like a leaf that got nervous. Your fingers smell faintly of smoke and resin, an unintentional scent disguise. You pretend you planned. At the next willow, 2 arm spans down where the path narrows, you find a sprung snare and nothing in it. The loop is tightened around a stick, as if the bush tried to catch itself. The trigger gnawed in a way that says rabbit teeth argued with boredom after the moment passed. You smile because you've done the same thing to willow bark while waiting. You loosen the knot with a thumb and the tip of a bone awl, rebraid the kinked fiber by rolling it under your thigh, and reset the loop at a height you could measure with your knuckles without looking. You rub a smear of damp soil along the cord because you learned that new fiber smell can be bossy. A little mud makes it mind its own business. A widely known truth lives in your fingers as you work. People in this time lay simple snares along traveled, animal ways loops of twisted plant fiber or gut, balanced on hair trigger. Sticks and check them with the dawn. They don't have to be many. They have to be patient. Your hands are patient, and they like knots. A lesser known trick you picked up from an older hand. You hang the reset snare on its stick over the hearth smoke for a minute before setting out so the loop remembers ash and not you. Whether that truly confuses a rabbit nose or just calms your mind is a debate for evenings. The dog votes for smoke, mostly because he hopes to be involved. You move on. The dog's ears point to things you don't see yet, and then you do. A trio of faint deer slots veering toward the meadow, fresh enough that the edges are still glossy. A boar's scuff, deeper, stubborn, turned toward the thicket, where roots think they're safe. A fox's light touch over your boot print from yesterday, sharp at the toe, like a quill you could write with. You judge age the way you judge faces. Edge sharpness, dew pooled or drained, whether a fly has bothered to autograph it. You place your palm near the deer print, not on it, and feel the tiniest cool rising from the hollow. New, then, it passed. In the last breath or two of night, the fish wear waits in the shallows like a patient fence. Willow stakes leaning inward, so the river does most of the persuading. You walk the line from the downstream side, eyes tracing the stones you placed to guide the current into the funnel. Some will wander because the river insists on editing. You slot a stone back into its place with your toes gentle, so you don't wet your moccasins through. At the edge's end, the dog copies your careful posture, which is generous of him since he has no stones to nudge. In the throat of the weir, a faint shimmer scales turning at the last second. You crouch, lift the basket trap you wove, partly because you needed it, and partly because it feels good to teach Willow to be useful, and find two fish, hand-linked, the color of polished tin. You hold them in the water and watch them answer, spines waking. The smaller slides from your palm on purpose. The larger you ease into a shallow wading pool you scooped from the stream bank for exactly this choice. You will decide in a minute whether today is his day. The river is generous, and you try to be too. There are days for fish and days for the idea of fish, and either one is breakfast's cousin. The basket needs a patch where a split grew exasperated. You pinch a reed, split it with a thumbnail, and stitch while your knees learn a better bend. The pitch line held. The weave says thank you by stopping squeaking. Historians still wonder how weirs like this one were governed, family-made, kept, or camp constructed, camp used, or anything in between. Rights and duties don't fossilize nicely, and would rarely stays to give testimony. Across river valleys, though, people leave ranks of stakes and old channels and patterns that look like funnels, even when the twig and wattle have gone. The record says this worked. The meetings that decided how and for whom remain deliciously unrecorded. You assume the rule here is simple. Whoever mends, tends. Whoever eats, helps mend. You leave a little bait-chopped river grass that confuses nobody, but makes you feel collaborative, and set the basket back. Over on the sandbar, a line of tiny prints runs like stitching from wet to dry and back again. You follow it to the drift line and find the maker, a sandpiper, deeply involved in being a sandpiper. It scolds you with the put-upon pride of small birds everywhere and dashes a few steps before discovering it's tired of dashing. The dog tilts his head and decides the bird is both essential and off-limits. He is a master of contradictions. From the weir you cut up through the alder fringe to the narrow game tunnel toward the thicket. A place where the dog switches from companionable to professional. His whole body lowering but not tensing, simply reducing noise. You shift your feet the same way, rolling each step so leaf litter thinks you're wind. A snapped twig at knee height tells you deer, not boar. A tuft of hair on rough bark, a grease pal, hollow, soft. You take the tuft between finger and thumb. Note the direction it leaned when it caught, and tuck it into a crack of bark where it won't catch the next nose. A lesser-known joy. You sometimes dust the smooth sand patch with ash from the hearth before you leave, and when you return, the faintest tread shows up like a message written in chalk on the earth. Today, the ash is still pale, nothing heavy. Crossed since you slept, composite points ride in your pouch. Microlith slivers set into a groove in bone with sticky resin, so the edges together make a long tooth common as birds in this age, and just as clever. Widely accepted fact, these little blades, set shoulder to shoulder, turn wood and antler into knives' barbs, and points that break to leave sharp surprises and can be repaired with fresh slivers when you're back at the fire. Your thumb checks, the binding the way tongues check a loose tooth. Everything holds. You hope you won't need them this morning. You enjoy having them anyway. Insurance has always been a state of mind. You pass a log that has been neatly gnawed into an exclamation. Point by someone with excellent teeth and strong opinions about hydrology. The beaver slide nearby is a glossy ramp where mud learned to shine. A little farther, a pale scrape on a stone antler, maybe where something stumbled and caught itself. A story in 2 inches of scuff and 1 shaken leaf. You read it and keep going. The world is verbose if you let it be. At the 3rd snare, you find the loop down and the trigger stick missing, dragged into a frill of fern where the ground blurs under torn moss. Your hand lifts, palm down, without thinking. The dog freezes. Like a word that forgot its vowels, you step wide around the blur to keep the edges clear and crouch on the other side to read the punctuation. 2 hind feet landed together, a twist, the faintest brush of fur against wet fern. You exhale. The rabbit left you a lesson about knot tightness. You retie with a modest improvement and leave a ridiculous compliment in your head for the rabbits. Speed. The dog reading your shoulders lets his ear relax. You both like when mornings stay slow. Light lifts in the undergrowth, the way water lifts in a pot quiet at first. The dog takes 1 crisp step and then waits for your nod before taking a second. He has learned your eyebrows, and you have learned his breath. You fit a small pebble into the sling pouch on reflex while listening to a rustle. 2 body lengths, a header, rustle that sorts itself into lizard, not lunch. and the pebble becomes just a worm in your palm again. You tell yourself you were practicing. You tell the dog you were practicing. He agrees, because that's his job. Here's a quirky habit you indulge when your head wants puzzles. You drop a single blade of grass across the entrance to a tiny tunnel and check it on the way home. If it's moved, someone smaller than your dog made a morning of it. It's not serious. It's the world's lightest door chime. Today you set one, half hoping a vole will autograph it. With luck, you'll get to pretend you're a detective. Later, for 10 seconds. On your way back toward the open line of the meadow, you pass the shallow basin where you smoothed the thin patch of mud last night with a rib bone. It holds an archive, a bird's light step, 3 toes forward, and a rear one tilting like a thoughtful shrug. Mouse's scribble, and a fox's cushiony ovals overlaying both, newer by feel, the edges still tidy. You wonder, briefly and with no need to know whether the fox was following or just happening its way through. Historians still wonder if tracking in camps like yours was taught formally lessons. Drills, tests, or simply soaked into everyone through being awake and outside. Together. Your guess is yes. You learned by watching feet, and then by being wrong a lot in the company of people who laughed softly and showed you again, which is the best kind of school. At the where again you decide. The larger fish is dinner. Not now. You lift him with both hands, murmur something you couldn't translate if asked, and carry him to a shaded pool woven with roots that make a natural pantry. He flicks twice and then holds gilled, waiting on your schedule. You rearrange too. Stones, with the authority of a person who has been to many meetings of one and always wins the vote. The dog notes the fish location in his personal atlas and then studiously looks away from temptation as if auditioning for sainthood. A breeze from the meadow flips a page in the reeds and carries the faintest sweetness. Crushed mint where someone's foot found a patch. Sun-warming sap in the broken stem of something green and ambitious. You glance at the sky through alder lace and see the colors shift another degree toward serious day. Your hands go to your belt and find your pouch and find the coil of cord and find themselves satisfied everything that needs doing here is done or waiting kindly. You turn toward the meadow path with the comfortable list forming in your head. Tubers in the damp place under willow. Early greens where the frost spent the night. Resin at the pine for glue and for the way it perfumes. The day berries if a bush argues, why not this early, and you decide to lose the argument. The dog bounces once, then remembers he is cool and reduces it to a respectable wiggle. You leave the small mark of your heel in the sand, a gentle comma that tells the river you're stepping out and will return to finish your sentence. You angle toward the meadow, letting the alder shade fall off your shoulders like a shawl you didn't pay for. The grasses ahead bead with dew that the sun hasn't negotiated yet, and each step shakes glitter free in small, approving sighs. The dog trots to your left, where the wind brings stories first. You keep to a faint track tamped by your own errands and the wider bellies of deer. This is your loop, learned by feet, tuned by hunger, unrolled calm as twine. At the meadow's margin, you pause to cut a thin digging stick from a sapling you marked last week, already fire-hardened at the tip and smoothed by your hands fussing. You press it into the seam where damp meets dry and pry gently until the ground exhales. A small round bulb rides up, cupped in black earth, pale as a fingernail moon. You feel for the trailing root, follow it with 2 fingers, and lift the pignet clean. Victory, the size of a plum. You loosen a second and tuck both into a bark-lined pouch, not because 2 is a banquet, but because 2 is morale. The dog watches, decides this is your sort of treat, and sits. You scratch the rim of his ear with the back of your wrist so you don't glove your friend in mud. Farther along, a fan of hoofmarks scallops the damp. You step aside from their habitual drift, a small courtesy in a busy restaurant with no walls. Young nettles stand glossy and righteous by a seep, buzzing with the idea of being themselves. You pinch the top sets of leaves with a quick jar motion and fold them inward so the hairs forget to sting, then drop them into your pouch. With the bulb, they'll simmer into something green that tastes like you did a good job of being alive. For your trouble, 1 hair finds you anyway. You wipe the spot with a crumpled dock leaf, the old truce that works often enough to seem like magic. Sorrel hides low. Arrow leaves with a lemon sigh, ready the moment you bruise them. You chew one for a bright minute and stash a handful more. Plantain's ribbed fans get a respectful nod. Chickweed sprawls like a friendly spill and earns a twist. Widely true, a basket of small things feeds a camp more reliably than one big gamble. And people have built mornings like this out of leaves, bulbs, seeds, and roots for longer than anyone remembers. Your basket's loyalty program is measured in lunches, not points. A line of taller stalks leans by the meadow's shoulder, ripe heads of wild rye and barley. Your composite sickle comes out, rib handle snug, tiny flint teeth set in resin. You cut low and slow, so seed falls into the basket, and the edge whispers against silica that will polish it glassy sickle gloss. The shiny receipt stone keeps. The dog pretends grass is fascinating, then admits it isn't, and settles as lookout. You leave every 3rd head for birds and luck, not by rule, but by courtesy to next season. Historians still wonder if people nudged these grasses, scattering heads, weeding rivals, or if the plants simply thrived near you because you're a messy eater with great timing. Either way, both of you benefit. As you step back into the hedge edge, a pine lifts a hand sticky with amber tears. Resin beads where a branch broke in the last wind. Sunlight caught and thickened into forest candy. You tilt a flake of bark, coax 2 drops onto it, and park them in your pouch to harden. Later, they'll become glue, tinder help, or chewing gum when the afternoon asks for a thoughtful jaw. Quirky bonus: Resin rubbed on a cord keeps it from fraying and makes your fingers smell like the word evergreen. A low hum finds you at the thicket's corner. Bees teasing early blooms in the bramble. A sound made of velvet and insistence. You don't go looking for their hidden pantry some days. You're brave. Some days you're wise. And today you only watch the map. Their bodies draw between flower and flower. Rock art from folks farther west will one day show a person hanging from a rope with a honey basket. You decide to admire that later. The dog agrees from a safe and sensible distance. Thicket narrows into a tunnel where the shade smells of leaf mold and last year's stories. Your digging stick finds a sedge root fat enough to matter. You pry and twist, freeing a length that will roast into something mild and honest. The dog noses the loosened earth and sneezes out a small comet. You tuck the root alongside nettles and bulbs, and the pouch begins to feel like an argument in your favor. A jay flies over, drops an opinion, and keeps the rest to itself. You cross a damp seam where your steps pull whispers from the turf, and there the prints of a boar, read like a parenthesis you'd rather not enter. You give the curve a respectful berth. The sling cord warms your palm, reminder and reassurance both. Widely accepted fact, small stones thrown well can announce your boundaries to animals that prefer negotiation. And a sling extends your arm the way a stick extends your reach. You practice once at a dead stump. The stone thunks, the dog approves. The stump remains unmoved. At a bend where wind collects seed like a miser, you shake ripe heads into your basket until the bottom shows a soft constellation. From habit, you crush a handful against the smooth pebbles, sniff the green flower, then lick a cautious finger. Sweet, grassy, a little bitter at the rim perfect. You tie the basket's mouth with a twist of cord so bouncing doesn't erase your morning's thesis. This is the grocery run, with a very strict bring-your-own-bag policy and an even stricter no express lane sign. The line, however, moves beautifully. Whether people walked loops like yours by agreed routes with names, trading zones and polite borders, or whether the map lived more fluidly kin and friendship thickening some paths, rain and luck erasing others, is a question you live rather than answer. The land remembers footprints badly and hearths well. The stories that went with them drift unless caught by a child who repeats them louder. Your loop exists in calf muscle and habit in the dog's head and your basket's shape. When you miss a turn, your feet argue and win. By the time the sun climbs to your cheekbone, the basket rides comfortable and the pouch bumps your hip with small, promising weights. You brush burrs from your cloak fringe, flick two off the dog's feathered tail, and point your toes toward the thin blue breath of camp smoke. The meadow lets you go without drama. The thicket keeps its secrets, but lends you lunch. You step back under alder shade and feel the air cool 2 degrees. The dog looks up for your yes. You give it, and both of you pad quietly home now. You return to the hearth with the meadow still shining on your ankles and set your basket down where the warm sand eats the damp. The fire blinks as if you've brought it news. You tilt the reed mat wider so smoke slips out in a proper ribbon. Then roll the hot stone with a char stick until the coals collect in a friendly oval. A small, competent sentry whose chief duty is receiving compliments. You oblige with a knuckle under the chin. He pretends it's part of safety protocol. Your neighbor slides in with a hello you can hear more in breath than sound, and sets to. Cracked ribs of willow across her knees. She studies your basket the way a carpenter studies a plank, kindly with plans. You pass her the reed needle you keep tucked in a twist of bark. Her fingers are fast, yours are willing. You watch how she doubles a split and turns it before. It threads through the little rotation that keeps a seam from gaping later. Knowledge here passes like flame. Close enough, you catch. You warm a thin blade of flint at the hearth edge. Not in the coals, just where heat relaxes glassy stone into cooperation. You pinch it with a scrap of hide. Set it on your thigh and use an antler, tine, to press small flakes from the edge. Each tick a clean syllable. Pressure flaking, your hand's old grammar. Push, release, listen. It's a widely accepted fact that people in this age do exactly this santler, bone, or hardwood against stone two-tune edges finer than a hammer alone can make. Under your thumb, the blade learns sharp without learning fragile. The dog rests his head on your instep and watches like you're performing surgery on a snack. You tell him he can have the offcuts, then produce one flake so tiny it would embarrass a flea. He sighs with dignity. On the slab your finds collect in a neat comet tail you'll sweep and save. Nothing slices fish skin quite like a newborn. Edge, the willow ribs creak softly as your neighbor works. You mirror her moves. Over-under becomes under-over. The basket breathes again where it was thinning. A lesser-known trick she mutters while not looking up. Chew the end of the split before you tuck it. Spit makes the plant remember it's flexible, and when it dries, it holds the new idea. You do as told and become glue for a second. The dog leans closer with the kind of interest that suggests you have just invented cuisine. Another neighbor joins, squats on her heels with a cracked loop of cordage and a child, who sits with the absolute consequence of a small rock in both hands. The rock is important. All other news may wait. Low voices make a braid who went a priver and saw elk shadow moving in the mist, who found mint where the seep widens and left a sprig by your shelf, who heard geese practice new insults. Someone mentions a patch of rye beyond the bend that looks like it wants a little help heads heavy. Weeds too enthusiastic in, you file that under later chores, disguised as a stroll. You polish the flint on your thigh with a skin scrap until the new edge flashes a sly grin. Then you test it on a strand of dry grass. It parts with that exact hush you always love, the quiet yeses of a tool happy to be itself. You set aside 2 microlith slivers that want reseating in a point. A thumb of resin warms at the fire. You thumb it with charcoal into a gray glue that sticks to everything except what you aim at, then begrudgingly sticks to that too. You press the slivers into the groove of a bone insert and bind them with a strand of sinew you softened in your cheek while you worked. Sinew shrinks as it dries, a helpful habit you wish sandals shared. Historians still wonder if camps like yours had named specialists the basket genius, the edge whisperer, the one who could coax a net from nettle in a day or if everyone wore all these skills at once, leaning extra hard on whoever happened. To be nearby and generous, you learn by watching and doing, and by the kind of teasing that means again, but better. If there are titles, there are only jokes. The child taps the rock on the hearthstone 1, 2, 3, and your neighbor reaches without looking to turn the tap 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 into a clack clack on a less sacred surface. The rock, not offended, approves of its new career. You slide your repaired basket toward the coals to warm the pitch seam, turning it slowly so heat kisses, not bites. Smoke threads into the weave, and will keep the next rain a polite visitor. Tiny soot constellations above you wait for their nightly rename. You point out the salmon's eye to the child, who considers, then renames it rock with feelings. Better you open your pouch and lay out the morning's smaller prizes. On a flattish stone, like you're a market with 1 customer, nettles, twirl, 2 bulbs, a sedge root, a little pile of grain, 3 resin. Tears. Someone's hand drifts by and leaves a sprig of mint. Another hand steals a berry with the practiced innocence of an ant. Trade is mostly touch. You tuck the nettles into the warm basket water to wilt their attitude later. Melt into green. The bulbs, speared on a twig, lean near heat until their skins blister and slip. The inside turning from stubborn to honest. You take the big spoon of bone-pocked from years. Smooth from every rinse and skim grease from a small pot of marrow. Broth someone parked earlier over stone-heated water. No one owns the spoon. Everyone knows where it lives. You add a pinch of grain and a few nettles to the pot, give it a stir, and breathe in the smell that announces midday will be kinder than it needs to be. The dog's eyebrows rise as far as eyebrows can travel. You promise him evaluation privileges. Later, a neighbor holds a broken point under your nose. You read its fractures the way you read footprints, where the wave froze, where the platform failed. You show the antler push, the angle the breath you take just before pressure, and you give the point back before the lesson turns into a lecture. Most problems here are solved at the speed of small advice. A widely true thing sits in the way you all huddle heartside. Fires like this are classrooms, clinics, kitchens, parliament, and theater, all without seats. News moves with hands. Decisions slide into place because you were standing near each other anyway. And the river plays background music, so no one has to be brave all at once. The idea of moving camp later is floated like a leaf on water, maybe after 2 sleeps. When the bank dries, when the wind favors the ridge, heads tip, the leaf keeps floating. No votes are counted. You'll know. The dog wanders off to drink from the upstream puddle he has personally certified and returns to fall asleep with his chin on your foot. A quality control device that runs on trust. A crane strafes the river with commentary. The child, inspired, honks back and frightens himself, then decides to be very busy with the rock's new job. Peace resumes. You lift the reed mat by the doorway half a hand's breadth because the smoke wants encouragement. It threads outward and the roof exhales. You scrape pitch strips where they strayed, roll them into a neat pea for later, a quirky habit you can't stop, rubbing a thumb of ochre into a fresh cord. It dyes your fingers and the twist, and when you find the cord again in the grass, you'll be glad it glows a little like sunset. You sew a split on your cloak's edge, bone needle darting, sinew drawing tight, and drying into a seam that will be even kinder tomorrow. Your neighbor tells a quiet story about a winter 3 rivers ago when the ice sang every night like a long drum, and people drummed back to keep the sky awake. You ask how long it lasted, she says, until it didn't, which is the sort of answer the world specializes in. You both smile at the usefulness of unhelpful truths. By the time the bulbs come free of their skins, the basket patch takes the right shine and the flint in your palm feels finished. The dog has dreamed twice and thumped a paw against your ankle. And 3 more small decisions have been made without being named. Which path to the resin tree this afternoon? Who watches the weir? Who will carry the extra cordage because you like to? You spoon a taste of nettle broth to your lips. Blow. Sip. Nod. And then tilt the spoon to the dog for a ceremonial sniff. He approves. He always approves. It's how the ceremony knows it worked. You bank the coals a little, push a collar of ash around the glow, so it will nap politely until you ask for flame again. The sun tips just past the shelter edge and finds your shell bead, knocks lightly against your chest in a rhythm that matches your breath. Low voices fold into the steady talk of the river, and your hands, satisfied for now, become quiet animals at rest. You stand, dust your palms, shoulder the patched basket, and wander past the reed wall toward the scruffy patch beyond the last shelter, where the ground remembers everything you've ever dropped on its hash. Bone flecks, seed, the occasional dramatic oath. The dog unfolds from your foot with professional reluctance and falls in beside you, a shadow that occasionally wags. Sun has climbed to a warm angle that pats your shoulder instead of poking it. Your legs feel long and useful. Your pockets, such as they are, feel like they're carrying plans. The path here is not a path so much as a habit drawn by feet and curiosity. It skirts the refuse fringe where last season's cracked shells and fine ash blend into a darker soil that behaves suspiciously like it likes you. Little green things stand taller in this strip, as if gossip improved their posture. You pause at a clump of wild rye you've been quietly rooting for, heads nodding like they know your name. You touch the stems low, where their beards catch, on your palm, and you shake with a careful, conspiratorial jiggle so ripe seeds tumble into your basket with a dry rain sound. If anyone asks what you're doing, you're obviously just walking with enthusiasm. You set the basket down and kneel to tug at the plants you have decided are not invited. Your fingers slip under broad leaves and pinch them free, roots and all, before they can bully your favorite stalks. You lay the uprooted troublemakers in a little heap off to the side, where they won't start a new argument. You are not a gardener, you tell yourself. You're simply an optimist with opinions about spacing. The dog lies sphinx-like with one paw over the pile, as if a pointed bouncer at the club where photosynthesis happens. Grain chaff sticks to everything: your sleeve, your belt, your good intentions. A breeze tugs it loose and twirls it over bare soil. Seeds bite your hide a little and hitch rides. Your calves become the first seed drill ever marketed as 2 legs. Lesser known delight. Awns knit themselves into cloak, fringe, and seam, to march upward on their own over the day. By dusk, you'll discover you've been smuggling a tiny cereal parade back to camp. You brush your knee and half a dozen seeds, agree to start a new life where they land. Between the rye clumps, little volunteers blink up goosefoot here. A brave barley, they're exactly where last moon you shook your basket out and stamped with your heels without thinking about it. Historians still wonder if thicker stands near camps like this came from deliberate planting or the glorious mess of living chaff tossed. Soup spilled, ash scattered, feet tamping everything into place. During late jokes, you pull a weed with theatrical innocence and do not take a position. You simply admire how well the ground takes a hint. Widely accepted truth sits in the back of your mind while you work. Forager camps like yours nudge landscapes on purpose, using fire, pruning, weeding, and choice harvests to coax more of what you like: berries, bulbs, grasses, long before anyone fences a field. A burned patch from last cold moon is already fringed with tender shoots, green like a fresh idea. You sweep ash from a hearth basket with your palm and let it sift around your favorite clump. Ash and bone crumbs make the soil behave like it's been reading manuals on generosity. The dog sneezes at the dust and adopts a look of stoic nobility. You pull one tall head close and rub it between your palms. The grains spill, chaff floats, and a ruthless portion of stalk falls to your feet. Some heads snap off whole, some shatter into a million escaping pieces. You notice, because you can't not, that the heads that cling until you tell them to are easier to carry, nicer to thresh, friendlier to plants. That small convenience is a world hinge. Plants that break less find your pouch more. Plants that ride with you ride to new spots. You are not selecting, at least not on purpose. You are merely helpful. And the rye thanks you by getting eerily cooperative. You slip a stick into the soil and lever up a tight bulb, the last of last year's. Patience and admire its tidy geometry. Nearby, sedge shoots cluster in the damp seam where your wash water often runs. You thin a few and replant 2 thumb lengths away with the same motion you use to tuck a child's hair. Quirky camp custom. Someone once stuck willow twigs in a muddy corner to dry a hide and forgot them. Now, a line of saplings shades your knees. You decide to pretend it was a plan. Future generations will award you a prize for accidental forestry. The dog pads 3 steps, pauses, pads 3 more, and finally collapses on cool dirt where your shadow falls, perfectly aligned with his belief that you exist to provide shade. He watches your hands with polite interest, usually reserved for fairy schedules and soup. You scatter a handful of chaff on a bare patch and heel it in, then drag your foot back to scuff loam into a low, curving line. Later, you'll walk past and read the curve like you read the river, a note to your future self that says you meant to remember. You take your digging stick and score shallow arcs around the rye clump, a moat against creeping competitors, and in doing so, you uncover 2 pale grubs, which you rebury with the solemn guilt of an accidental landlord. A jay heckles you from a hawthorn and drops a berry it was pretending not to eat. The berry lands precisely where you would have planted it if you were the sort of person who planted. The dog looks from berry to jay and writes a stern letter with his eyebrows. Farther along the fringe, a patch of ground tells a different story, trampled bare, tamped smooth during a winter of many feet, and one good joke repeated 100 times. At the edge of that patch, the first green shoots of dock and goosefoot stand in a tidy arc. Perhaps because that is where you tipped the sweepings from the grinding slab, or because seeds like a border, or because the world likes to keep you entertained. You take a pinch of seed from your pouch and flick it into the arc as if saluting. You are a human seed broadcaster with a very small, very local audience. You've heard a story about a camp operaver where someone built a low brush fence around a favorite stand of grain and discovered geese are surprisingly effective security, loud and easily bribed. Historians still wonder which came first in places like this, fence, patch, or goose. Your version involves no fence, only the strategic glare you practice when a deer leans too long over your rye. You are not scary, you are persistent. Sometimes, that's the same thing. You break a brittle stalk into lengths and lay them as mulch around the base of a clump because you like the way it looks and because it keeps your heels from mud. The smell of crushed green rises, sharp, a little lemony, where sorrel sulks underfoot. You tuck a few nettle tops into the basket, some for supper, some to steep into cordage dreams and leave others standing. A bank account that pays in tea and fiber. The dog approves of any plan that involves future snacks, immediate shade, and no bees. You squat and pinch a head of barley, rub, blow the papery bits off your palms, and taste the sweet grit. It's a good patch, honest and improving. Your hands, remember, another patch near a cave with a high mouth, where someone cached seeds in a basket and forgot them until the cave remembered everything at once. Those little hoards happen, proof that saving is only a stray thought away from history. Here, your storage is simpler. Pockets of soil wearing your fingerprints. You step back to look the way you always do when you pretend to be objective. Rye clump sits cleaner. The path between clumps reads like a decision instead of an accident. and your basket carries the modest weight of the morning's votes. Historians still wonder if this shaking, scattering, weeding, tamping, watering, with leftover kindness counts as gardening or only flirts with it. You wonder too, and then your dog sneezes, and the sound translates to, call it whatever you like. Just don't forget where you put the fish. Before you go, you pour a little water from your skin into the dry margin where seedlings look hopeful. You don't flood just a sip, the same courtesy someone gave you with nettle broth earlier. The ground darkens to a richer brown in size, in that way, soil size, if you're paying attention. You scratch 3 shallow marks on a flat stone and set it at the edge, a private sign that your future self will read as this one. Yes. The wind lifts a chaff flake from your sleeve and lands it perfectly in your new circle. Agreement reached. On the way back, you pull 2 dock leaves, big enough to be plates, fold them into your belt, and tap a willow with your knuckles where resin beads again. You collect 1 tear and leave 2. The dog noses your knee, gives you a look that says we have achieved sufficient agriculture for 1 noon, and turns toward camp with the authority of a creature who knows where lunch lives. You fall in beside him, basket whispering against your hip, cloak flicking burrs from its fringe. A small procession of 2 and several thousand future plants, as camp hum rises ahead and the reed edge of your shelter finds your eye. You glance back once. The patch you tidied is almost invisible from here. Green, nested in green. Your footprints, a mild rumor in the dust. You made very little difference, and somehow also changed everything a little. It is the kind of experiment you prefer. Quiet, low stakes, reversible, and delicious. The dog agrees in principle and, for emphasis, discovers a forgotten berry in your wake and eats your data. Heat gathers on the reed wall until it glows a little, and the air inside your shelter shifts from breath cool to drowsy warm. You lift the mat a hand's width higher to persuade the smoke to choose outdoors, and it listens, slipping into a thin ribbon that lays flat before it rises. The dog relocates 3 feet to the left and becomes a rug with ears, choosing the one spot where shade, breeze, and your foot can all happen at once. You slide the basket nearer the hearth, but not too near, and the steam that was a voice becomes a whisper. The camp settles into late morning manners. Footsteps lift, shorten, and slow, as if everyone agreed not to wake the heat. Someone hums to notes and lets them wander away. A child surrenders to a lap and a thumb. The thumb wins. Your neighbor tucks a mint sprig behind your ear when you aren't looking. The dog notices and then decides it isn't food, which is personal growth. You smear a thumb of red ochre down the inside of your wrist and ankle with a little fat. A sun and bug paste older than any bottle, and the color sits there like a quiet badge. Quirky truth. When you mix ochre with fat and a breath of resin, the smear stays through sweat and river and smells faintly like a pine took a bath in summer. The midges reconsider their life choices, and you feel just ceremonial enough to stand up straighter. Your dock leaves unfold to become plates, and the nettle broth thickens into a green that promises a soft afternoon. Someone asks without a question, 2 fingers lifted toward the ridge end. Someone else answers without a sentence, palm down. Later, plans arrive here as gestures, arriving on the same wind as dragonflies. Widely accepted reality hums in the back of your head. People like you move camp when it makes sense, season to season. Bend to bend following what runs, what bites a little less. Archaeologists will one day find your hearth stains and your broken stone and your shell beads and say they were here and they were there, which is exactly right and also misses the comfortable part, the hold-aside part. You sit with a bowl and listen as decisions take shape. The bank below your shelter is drying, cracking into plates that will turn to dust when you look at them too hard. The weir works better when the water rides a finger higher. The resin tree still weeps, but the last wind took the easy tears and left the high ones. A patch of rye beyond the curve is heavy enough to lean, which is either an invitation or a trap. The midges have adopted the low bend as an arena, and you are not buying tickets. Someone suggests nudging the shelters a spear length back, toward the birch line more shade. Fewer theatrics and heads tip in a small, wordless vote. Historians still wonder how camps like yours resolve these choices. A single voice leads, because it often has. If elders steer with memory, if the loudest child gets their way, or if the day itself makes the speech and everyone just nods to what they already knew. You live the answer instead of writing it down. Whoever knows a thing says it. Whoever can do a thing does it. And when there's doubt, you sit by the fire and wait long enough to learn its opinion, which often arrives disguised as wind. You glance at the blade of grass you left across that vole tunnel on your loop. It's shifted, laid gently aside, the way a careful little citizen moves furniture. Case closed, you announce to the dog with one eyebrow. He blinks like a judge and authorizes a nap. At the river's edge, your fish waits in the root pantry. You'll smoke it if the wind stays kind. Lay it on a low frame of green sticks above coals, so slow that time itself gets salted. The smoke has a job beyond flavor. Bugs hate it, and you like that boundary. If the camp decides to slide uphill, the rack will walk with you in 3 hands. Your portable kitchen rebuilt with the same rhythm. You rebuilt your bed last year on the other bank. You clean your spoon with a thumb and a sprig of mint and tuck both into your belt. Across the way, someone shakes a mat and the air flickers with small sun. Someone else knits a length of net from nettle. The knots so even you feel competitive on behalf of physics. A neighbor stands and points with her chin toward the ridge. 2 others stand in answer. Scout there. You nod that you'll check the resin, patch the weir throat that's drifting, pulled the last of the nettles from the seep's edge before the heat makes them too proud of themselves. The dog lifts his head at the word there, reads the direction, and puts it back down a meeting RSVP that says available later. You set a handful of green herbs mint, a little yarrow, a flake of damp horsetail on the coals, and they smudge into a soft smoke that persuades flies to find more interesting art. The smell braids with the hearth's warm voice and the resin. You thumbed into your cord earlier and becomes the scent of the entire idea of home. You slide a hot stone into the warm basket water for anyone who wants a sip that doesn't taste like a winter's dare. Even the spoon in the pot leans back against the rim, relaxed and dignified. A little repair calls your name. You peel back the reed mat and inspect the roof where the soot constellations dappled to shadow salmon's eye. Bent stick, sleepy dog faded to ghost images in the excellence of noon. A lash has loosened where a thong dried and forgot its obligations. You untwist it and retie, then smear the knot with a whisper of resin so it remembers what you meant. A child trudges by, dragging a stick with an expression that would frighten midges. You offer the child a mission carry this small pebble to that big pebble without letting it touch the ground, and the child becomes a courier with destiny. Peace follows in the wake. You walk out to the weir because you like to see how your morning is doing. The river has flattened, wide and lazy, its surface divided into clean stripes of slow and slower. The basket throat holds to flashes you set free because the rack isn't ready and your appetite isn't bossy. You wedge 2 stones back into their places and the dog steps onto the sand in exactly your old footprints. Because style is important. Heat shimmers above the meadow, turning deer into suggestions. You tuck the sling cord into your belt so it doesn't whisper and watch a gust comb the grass. A hand passing over a sleeping face. On the way back up, you rinse your hands and your face, and the shock is friendly. You shake your head and loose. Water from your braid, the droplets catching sun the way fish scales do, as if light were a tiny net. You sit by the hearth again, lean your shoulder to the reed wall, and unclasp the bead at your throat to rub grit from the cord, then clasp it again by feel muscle memory in miniature. The dog rolls, offers his ridiculous belly to the world, and sighs a sigh that sounds like it learned everything it needed to know before breakfast. A fact, and you nod to it. People all over this warming world are learning new borders for old rivers and new timing for old berries. Moving the way trees march uphill, one seed at a time. Revisiting the places that say yes and leaving places that say maybe later. In your body, the fact becomes smaller and kinder. You can pick up your house and move it 3 body lengths into more shade. And that belongs on the to-do list. Just understir the pot. You savor the power of small solutions. You take up the digging stick and press it into the earth where the new shelter edge will tuck. An outline sketched like a promise you can keep by supper. The ridge team returns with dust on their calves and a handful of stories. Berries flirting along a sunny fold. An elk track measured with 2 handspans and a grin. A patch of stone that naps like a good argument. They sit, sip, point, lean back. The news goes into the air and hangs there until it turns into an afternoon's plan. Someone lays a branch where the door wants to be. Someone else lifts a hearthstone to test the ground under it. You tuck your cloak under your knee to kneel, without complaint, and your knee thanks you by not writing you a letter in the evening. You mark the last thing you meant to mark today. The pebble where the stick's shadow, dip, was at true noon. Another bead in the curve you're building in. The sand. Your shallow arc will tell you when the sun starts to swing toward other seasons, and maybe when this bank will stop playing nice. You press the pebble into place, careful, firm, and the dog presses his nose to it and sneezes once to bless the science. It's robust peer review. By now, the hot part of the morning settles into the kind part of the day. Work turns into fidget jobs, and shade turns into currency. You pull the dock leaves from your belt and fold them to make lids for the pot so flies must fill out a form. Then set the stick across the doorway so everyone remembers to step lighter. The smell of broth, smoke, pine, and sun-warmed reed wraps you in something softer than a cloak. And it is no trouble at all to close your eyes for a moment while you make a plan, and the plan makes you. The wind eases, and you ease with it, letting your breath lengthen in a way that feels like a river turning a wider bend, slow to begin, and slower still as the curve opens. Each inhale, a calm reach out toward the bright edge of the day, and each exhale, a gentle drift back to the hearth, where the coals rest and the dog sleeps. And you tell your shoulders that there is nothing to lift right now. Not the basket, not the mat, not even a thought heavier than a reed leaf. And they listen, and they lower, and every part of you understands simple instructions again. The reed wall makes it tiny. Familiar ticks as the sun warms it, and the lashings tighten and relax. An old house noise that might as well be rain. And the smoke that escapes the doorway has thinned into a pale thread, so fine you could stitch a quiet with it. And if you look, which you don't have to, you could see dust motes in the bar of light making their slow snow. Patient, unbothered, absolutely on your side. The dog, lying along your shin, breathes in a small 3-beat rhythm, and without thinking, you match it for a few minutes, in for 3 soft paws. Out for 3 soft paws, the way sleep sometimes comes to people who are not trying to be impressive. And your hands that did everything are no longer doing, and your feet that took you to water and meadow and back again are now only feet, warm, quiet, content to be attached to you and not responsible for anything at all. Somewhere, a crane decides not to say what it was about to say, and even the river has turned its voice down to a hush meant only for those who are listening with their eyes shut. You picture the path you made this morning. At the edges, the dogs running alongside, already the sun smoothing them, and the fish resting in the shaded root pantry like a silver comma, waiting at the end of a gentle sentence, and the soot constellations above your head salmons. I bent stick, sleepy dog fading in daylight, but still there, perfect for later, when you will rename them again, and they will not argue. You remind yourself that you did enough for one morning, that the day is kind and long, and not asking for anything loud, that you can float a little here, near the fire in the slow river, with mint under your ear and smoke in your hair, and you can let your breath melt into the shape of a camp's breath, in and out and in again, until even the idea of time becomes soft as moss. And the last thing you consider before you stop considering is that everything you need is within arm's reach, and most of it is already in your hands.